here we go. Hi, it's Tiffany Lorraine again, and I've brought you another amazing speaker, and I'm going to let her introduce herself. The stage is yours.
Hi, Tiffany. I'm so glad to be here today. My name is Mikel Trobough. I am a dating and connection coach for women, including resilient mothers. And I help to empower women to cultivate true partnership and deepen connections in their romantic and personal lives. So I'm really passionate about what I do. The name of my program is Passion Forward Coaching. And, this is kind of a topic and a subject that's really near and dear to my heart because it has a lot to do with my own origin story as a mother and how I, kind of transitioned into this work. So I'm thrilled to be speaking about it with you today.
Wonderful. So how is what you do or your story apply to resilience, which is the theme of the summit?
Well, it's interesting. And it actually came up yesterday in one of my communities. I feel like a lot of times, like relationships just don't go to plan. That's just the way it works, whether it's a marriage, dating, anything, stuff happens. And, ultimately you get to these crossroads where you have to decide, how much to give and where to put your energy. Right. And so someone I spoke with was reflecting on, kind of the should I stay or should I go? And in my own story, when I came up as a mother with these questions, one of the things that I kept forefront in my mind is I think it can't be understated the role that we play in our children's futures as our same sex or opposite sex modeling when it comes to how they're going to show up in partnership, both for their partners and for themselves. And so for me, could I have muddled through that relationship? Sure. And is it, absolutely the right thing to give it your all and work on it as much as you can? Absolutely. But I think when you really get honest with yourself about what you need as a person and what you're modeling for your children and keep that, kind of forefront in the mission, it helps kind of guide everything. So for me, what that meant really getting serious about the skills that I had when it came to building the kind of romantic partnership that I wanted. And there was a lot of lacking because I didn't have that modeling myself, and it that kind of started me on my journey of really learning more about relationship theory and how to cultivate healthy habits and all of that. So I think it plays a huge role in my coaching.
So it sounds like it begins with a relationship with yourself. Is that what you mean?
Absolutely. Yep, I think so. And I think, as mothers, like a lot of times, we think that, to give to others, we have to neglect our own needs. And, really at the forefront in my coaching, especially with women, especially with mothers, is to really note that, it, like, not only do you have to secure your own oxygen mask first, but the way you treat yourself, if you have a daughter or a son, the way the standards that you set and the boundaries that you set in your own relationships is going to determine the way they treat their partner or the way they expect their partner to treat them, just based on your modeling as a woman. And so once I really, decided to put that first, a lot of things fell into place for me. So it's been really exciting.
What do you say to a day and age where a lot of relationships are failing, that there are a lot of single parents like myself, and there's a lot of divorce? What do you think is the catalyst for what's going on? And where is that line between a relationship that needs work or a relationship that's abusive and you must leave? And when I speak of abuse, I want to be really clear that it's not just physical abuse. Of course, you should always leave physical abuse, but there's more subtle abuse that is not something you can visually see, that not only affects the mother, but affects the children. Where is that line? And what are your suggestions for being resilient, whichever way that it goes?
Goodness, I feel like I have so much to say on that. I'll start with, you said in this day and age, relationships failing. I think that it's a combination, right? So I think that there is an epidemic of that modeling being different for at least two generations before us. So what we're finding is that we've done away with a lot of the negative stereotypes and the negative obtrusive gender roles. But we haven't replaced it with anything. So we haven't taught our children or ourselves in some situations what it means to show up as a man or a woman in romantic partnerships. So that's number one, right? Number two, so as a society, that falls on us to rewrite the rule book. So number one, but number two is that, you know, within that, we're also many of us raised by single parents, so or raised in dysfunctional environments. So you need to take a close look at what was modeled for you and how you might be extending any of those patterns and what needs to be disrupted or replaced. And so I think that, in short, like, that's the biggest thing that you can do to impact your relationship. And in terms of boundaries around, I like to think of myself as trauma informed or trauma aware. Obviously I don't pretend to give any kind of medical advice, but I think especially in this area of life where abuse is kind of manifested and cultivated and perpetuated, right? It's really important to be able to tell what requires medical intervention, what requires, not only how can you show up with healthy habits, but what do you do when that's not what you're dealing with. And so in terms of, I think another thing to keep in mind is that it takes two to tango. Any good relationship coach is going to let you know that it's really a combination of the inner work, which is the big lift, and then skills, right? And so you have to be really committed and dedicated, just like when you go to work out in the gym, at overturning in both of those areas any deficits you have. But your partner has to be able and willing to meet you there, or else it's just not going to go anywhere. And then, sorry, I know, like,
Oh, you're doing great. Keep going. I love this.
The last part of your question had to do with the children, right? And so I think that, it's not only important, like what I was saying, to take note of how you're showing up and what you're putting out there, but also to balance whatever your partner is bringing to the table. So if you have a partner who's passively abusive and you can suffer through it and, maybe still maintain the type of modeling you want to give as a woman, which is hard, then you also have to keep in mind that it doesn't matter, because whether you have a son or a daughter, if you have a son, he's likely to perpetuate those same patterns that your partner's bringing. And if you have a daughter, they're very likely to tolerate that same behavior from a future partner. And I think sometimes as women, we'll do for our kids what we won't do for ourselves.
Oh, amen to that. Yeah, I left
So
an abusive situation for that very reason. I would have stayed in it had I not had my child. And so it's funny how that love for them and wanting better for them can sometimes motivate us to leave situations we may not otherwise be able to leave.
Yeah, and do what's right for ourselves, and at the core of my program, there's a lot in the space that I work, the niche that I work, around feminine communication, feminine energy, blah, blah, blah. All of that gets kind of a bad rap sometimes. And people tend to interpret that as like, the women doing all of the emotional labor for the relationship. And I see it differently. I see it more as with all of the complications that we just discussed, we as women have so much put on us that just doesn't belong there. Right.
Oh, absolutely.
But shifting into your feminine energy is really about boiling down to the core and understanding that we have everything within us that we need to navigate these situations, to, cultivate partnership, to consider the needs of our loved ones, because that's baked into who we are, regardless of how, genderly outwardly masculine we present in the world. We still have those intuitive drives, right? Yes. And anyone who loves us and values us and treats us with respect is going to be energized by that. They're going to be, magnetized by that, and they're going to want to be a part of it. So by shifting into our feminine core, we also allow our partner to grow and and to rise to the occasion.
So for a woman who's not attracting what she wants in a relationship, would you say that it might be because they're not completely honest or true with themselves, and you have to do that work first before the right people to come into your life?
I think that's a big part of it in most cases. My program, we center around, I have a three-tiered approach, a three-phased approach, which addresses, kind of level one, your inner work, level two, your interpersonal skills, and then number three, deepening connection and bonding. Right. And so, it's important to spend time in all of those, but I also find that I boiled it down to three roots and underlying causes that tend to hold women back in these situations, and a lot of them do center around limiting beliefs or, kind of needing an energetic shift, like we just talked about. And their expectations around relationships. So it really does require a lot of reflection, but it's important, I think one of the benefits and the number one reason I would suggest someone hire a coach if they're interested is because that person's already done the homework, right? So you can experience much quicker results if you're with somebody who knows what questions to ask, like you don't have to be the expert at everything. Right. So partnering with someone who has, learned these lessons the hard way or really dug into, it's not just my own personal experience, which I feel like, gosh, I feel like I was a dating disaster. So every mistake in the book, I've made it. Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I do have a lot of personal experience and all of my clients' experience to draw on, but there's a lot of hard, fast science, psychology, history and to back up some of these practices. And hopefully, if you're working with the right person, they're able to streamline that and make it very easy for you to understand and to grow and to blossom into it.
So do you customize your program a little bit to each individual depending on where they're at in that process?
That's a great question. Absolutely. I do think that is one thing that is different about my program, I hope, or that I try to pride myself on, is that I've really worked hard to provide structure as well as tailor it to the individual person and their specific needs, right? So I think anyone who is looking for relationship advice, you'll hear all these different sound bites, and a lot of them seem contradictory, right? Like they're puzzle pieces, but if you don't put them in the right order, if you don't understand how they connect, you're not going to be able to. You're just going to be more frustrated than you started off with. So really assessing kind of how much work does a person need to do in each of these phases, and then also partnering with them to say like, okay, we're going to build you a little tool chest of resources and tricks of the trade, so to speak, or tools, communication tools that you can leverage based on what you are not great at specifically versus just kind of universal advice.
That's wonderful. And as mothers do this, they'll be a great example to their children to also embrace their individuality and their journey of discovering what they need in a relationship, like the five love languages, for example, understanding how to express those needs, I think are sometimes the really hard things between men and women that are very different. Like women need to just talk through it. They don't always need a solution. Sometimes they just need to talk through it. But the man wants to often be the hero, and he wants to solve the problem, and he wants to be in that hero role for somebody who wants to be their knight in shining armor. And we need to encourage those things. Do you find those things to be true?
Not only do I find them to be true, I find them to be critical. And I credit all of my success and all of my understanding with a shift in how I think about those things specifically, in terms of, we have a tendency to think of, well, men and women's differences are, a clash, right? But when you strive to really understand and see the beauty in those drives, once I realized, it's not for me to say that I was designed the right way, but the entire 50% of the population was designed the wrong way. It's for me to appreciate those differences that are inherent and stop trying to expect them to be more like me or encourage them to be more like me, but instead appreciate the ways that the reasons behind those drives. Like, why is he motivated to be the hero? That's not to make me feel bad. It's not because he thinks I'm weak, right? It's because there's a rhyme and a reason to that relationship. And our biological instincts and our hormonal firings and all the different things that make us human beings, that are natural tendencies. And when you can start to appreciate those differences, for the purpose that they serve and the beauty that they can bring into your life, it and then also look at your own and just focus on doing your part rather than doing it all. um, it's it's really cool. It changes the whole dynamic.
That's beautiful. And I think something we've lost a little bit as single parents have to step into both roles. I know for me, I had to recognize that I had really shifted into more of my masculine power in a way that it was not attracting the relationships that I wanted. I don't want a feminine partner. I want a masculine partner so I can get back into my femininity, but I still have to find a way to balance that. Like I have to make sure I'm in the right place and I'm the kind of person that I want to attract. And so uh, it's great to hear that that's part of the path and that I'm on the right path and that there's an opportunity for others to find coaches to help them to bridge that gap and to get there faster so that they can meet their relationship goals. And we all need each other. We all need those relationships. And I think today, especially with families not living close to each other and supporting each other the way they used to, women feel a lot in our partners. Like we put a lot on our partners today that we didn't used to in the past, because we kind of now with technology don't have the same sense of community in all areas. Maybe in smaller towns this is still true, but I find you put a lot on your partner. You're relying on that one person for a whole lot that we used to kind of rely on a community or our immediate family for. And because of distance and because of culture, it's not the same, and it's kind of an unfair pressure. Do you find what would be your suggestions with that in mind?
I mean, I couldn't agree more. I think we're on an untenable track, which is one of the reasons I'm passionate about what I do. I think that we're in a situation where technology and society is evolving for us to be more individualized and more siloed and more independent. And yet we have this need for interdependence, but we have no model by which to create it. We have no idea, how, let alone to create it with someone who is our polar opposite, who's bringing something completely different than we bring to the table. So it does require, like, a lot. The number one complaint I get from people is it shouldn't be this hard. I shouldn't have to work. Like, why is it so much work just to even attract the right partner? It's like, well, you don't have to do the work. You can play it by chance and hope that you luck out.
Mm.
But when we look at the statistics, most people aren't winning that bet.
Yeah.
So if you simply look at it as something that, like, I'm sure you don't know how to, like, weave a rug by hand, but maybe your great grandmother did. Like, if you look at it as something that we just have lost our way in how to leverage this one aspect of life, and it requires a little bit more effort and a little bit more study, I guess, to get good at it, then I think that there are ways. But as a culture and as a society, I think we get to embrace it and not, um, just to kind of touch on your last point. Lately, there's a lot in the coaching realm or in the advice realm for women, um, that's really like it's one side coin to raise your standards and make sure you're not settling and, like, know what, have expectations, right? But it's something else to be compassionate about the other side too. So it's a fine line. I feel like we're at a breaking point where on the one hand we need to dig in and learn this stuff, but if we learn it the wrong way, it can have the opposite effect. If we forget to be compassionate and we just focus on our piece too much, then we almost start kind of demonizing the other side. And I don't
Well, and
want
you
that
can
either.
have what I've discovered is called conditional love, where you're looking for them to check off a set of boxes before you're going to give them the opportunity to love you. You're going to make sure you get something before you give. And I think that's especially true for people who've had trauma or people who've been abandoned. It's just
Mhm.
harder to trust and to give before they know it's safe. And and today you do have to be careful. I was some advice about being safe, especially with online dating and ways that people can be very deceitful, and also red flags when to be safe online, and what red flags maybe are things that you've seen or advice you've had to give.
I mean, I feel like that's something that I don't want to, get too deep into on a platform like this. It's better because so much of it is case by case, and there's so many sound bites already circulating out there. You can find a top 10 list of red flags to avoid, but without context, they're meaningless, and that's one of the problems. And that's one of the things that I distinguish in my program, is trying to apply it to the context so that it's meaningful, so people can cultivate true learning. Like, I've got a background in training and onboarding and HR, and so bringing some of that content delivery to the program is really important. Yes, you do have to beware of safety, right? So it is important, and I think any kind of resources, I'll try and drum one up that I can provide to come along with the post. Any resources about like best practices, whether it's like, you don't go somewhere without a cell phone, obviously, or, just the basic things of not to get abducted, is important. But in terms of, I think there's a lot of kind of ghost hunting, I would say right now, where women are thinking if they do enough work on the front end, they're going to avoid pain on the back end. And that just is simply the opposite of what's true. The reality is, somebody who's going to lie or hurt you or break your trust is going to do so regardless. And there are reasons that evolve that create the opportunity for them to do that. And where those reasons evolved is very specific to each situation. So the idea that there's just some, way to like weed out a bad guy that's blanket is, I mean, I think the things that are real true red flags that you should just disengage right away are hopefully pretty obvious. Hopefully as adults, we're able to spot those, but women are really looking for these kind of deeper hidden meanings. And I think that sometimes that can be blinding to what's actually going on.
Would you suggest new couples have relationship coaching before they get married, or how important is relationship counseling in your opinion?
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't think it's a bad idea. I think you have to take each situation as it comes and do what's right for you. You have to strike a balance, just like with our mental health, kind of same thing. It's great that we're building awareness, but you have to, figure out how much work you need to do, and how much intervention is appropriate, and then what and how much time and energy and effort are you able and willing to invest. And I do think that there's no wrong stage to get support. I
So
think that,
married, still married,
yeah,
maybe just to
absolutely.
in the
Dating,
relationship,
so single,
divorce,
dating,
dating, single.
new to the relationship, 1 year in, people tend to lose it at certain crossroads. There's certain kind of like levels of commitment that people get into where things start to get harried. And but whether or not you really need, how much support you need should be based on the situation. But I don't think there's any wrong time to get support. And like a lot of times, I'll share just like my at the time that I first started pursuing this, as I find with most women, they're looking to salvage like they see the ship going down and they're like, no, 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 I'm not going to do this again. Like, I need help, mayday, mayday. Right. So it's usually is the women that will come and seek out that support. And unfortunately, sometimes by the time we're at that stage, that particular connection may already be in disrepair, or there may be some things that have been festering for a long, long time that aren't necessarily going to get, you can't kind of put the egg back in the shell, so to speak, right?
Yeah.
But what I always tell my ladies is that, we're going to do our best, and we're going to learn from whatever happens. And then at the worst case scenario, you're going to be better prepared to not make those same mistakes again.
Yeah. So one, don't be ashamed to ask for help. And two, follow your intuition. If something's off, figure out what it is, whether that means the relationship needs to be released, or it needs some work, or it needs some help. And always know that there is compassion involved in any relationship, and that the relationship doesn't have to just end abruptly because something isn't working. It can be worth fighting for. But if there is abuse, always the advice in any of these interviews that I've had is leave the abuse for sure. And
You have
take
to be
the
safe
lessons.
first, especially if you're a mom and you've got kids involved. It's like safety first in all situations. And I think just to kind of reiterate, uh, being realistic about the level of support that you're looking for, and then being willing to engage and invest that level of support. So finding the right coach, the right program, the right level of intervention to accomplish the goal that you need, just looking at it like a tool. Some people just need to read a book. Other people really need turn-by-turn GPS, as they navigate these waters.
So how do people connect to you, and what offering do you have for this audience today?
So I came up with something exciting. People can connect me. I'll give a link to both my Calendly and my Facebook group. But people, what I'm doing for this is an offer that I haven't offered before, but just for participants of the summit, I'm going to do a 3-session jumpstart bundle, which is like basically $1,000 value of 3 sessions with me. It's going to give you a foundation of, what you want to accomplish, background, what tools and specific things you would need to address to at least point you in the right direction, as well as get like a good taste of what it is that I do for my clients and how that feels. And then if you did want to continue on with any of my signature offerings, I would give a specific Resilience Summit discount for these participants as well.
Wonderful. Thank you for that. We'll make sure those are attached. All speakers that are involved, we're going to have links and going to have offerings for you, our audience. And we thank you so much for joining us. Now, I like to end with a little dance party. I do have a sleepy baby in my arms, however, but I want to see your best Zoombox dance move.
Oh gosh, I wasn't prepared. I think I just do like the white man's overbite mostly.
Okay, that's a very short dance party, and I will just cut there.
Thank you, honey. Have a great day.